now. So the idea is to have a disk to cloud implementation rather than disk to tape. These two can be combined too as well. And we do have our virtual machines running on hypervisor. We do have Veeam. We do have StarWind VTL connected to that Veeam machine, presenting a regular tape library. And then as tapes get backed up to StarWind machine, it will have local tape storage. So it's not tape, it's just spindles, but it will have certain amount of tapes local, and then the rest of the tapes will be replicated to S3 and then destaged to Glacier down the road when they're not needed.
And so is that represented as slot ranges in each
That's per tape, yeah. So the whole idea is to implement it in software without any additional hardware, and also make it transparent, so any backup software can work with that. It will just see it tape device, and the backup and the restore process will be completely transparent. So you just need to fetch the tape from S3, or you need to fetch the tape from Glacier, or you fetch the most recent backups from local tape storage. And it is all configurable, so you can, let's say, have the weeklies local, then the monthlies still running in S3, one of them, and everything else just dumped to Glacier to save money and space on the S3 and on the local storage.
And if things go completely to hell, then I can fire up the VTL in a Windows
software VTL anywhere, yeah.
Catabone.
Restore. And we do have 14 minutes. I can show a small demo, and there is also a possibility to do an off-camera session if you want to have one. So
a couple more questions.
Sure.
Going back to the HCI offering, keeping in mind the roadmap as well, are there any plans to include things like containerization, specific volume drivers, like a Docker volume driver or anything of that sort?
So we do have plans like that. I don't have the details. It may be Anton who has the details on Docker, if you have.
Well, there's a lot of talking about the containers, but when it comes to, to the real adoption, the level is not that great. So we do looking at this one, and we pretty much know what to do, and we're pretty much ready to do that. But we don't see, the point of non-return being crossed with this kind of consumer adoption. That's the point. So it might be this year, but it's not, the greatest plan. It's not where we are, strictly focusing right now.
So as a HCI offering, what about the setup? Is it as automated as all the other sort of leading HCI offerings like Nutanix and vSAN or VCF and that sort of offerings, or is it just manual? How does that work, the initial setup?
The initial setup is on the factory end, and the only thing customer needs to do is add machines to the domain and create a cluster on top.
So it comes pre-built?
Yeah, it's come pre-built and pre-configured. And also, there is a default storage configuration, so it would have the flash configured as a tier, but if customer decided, okay, I have just a few virtual machines which I want to be all on flash all the time, we also have an option to give him an all-flash LAN and then a spindle LAN.
Any limitations on the cluster sizes?
The technical limitation is 64 nodes, but with the way we scale out, I would rather use it with VMware, but not yet with Hyper-V, just because of the storage management part of it.
You support multiple capacity tiers, or is it still just a single capacity tier? Well, I mean, if you had, let's say, a couple of these devices in your storage nodes and a couple of real SATA disks, something like that.
It can be mixed.
Yeah.
Can be mixed between each other.
Can intermix?
Yeah, can be mixed. You can mix a physical drive, to S3.
So do you support the policies that would direct data from, like the local capacity tier to, I'll call it the S3 capacity tier and things?
Well, not at this point, but that's also possible. I mean, it's.
So if you intermix, then it would be effectively random whether the data went to S3 or a local disk.
Yeah.
Got another question slightly more towards the business side of it as opposed to technical side. HCI market is quite saturated at the moment. You got big players like VxRail, Nutanix to sort of new up and coming vendors backed by big players like Hyperflex, etc., etc. Where are your key USPs? Is that in the price or is that in certain technologies? I mean, we've kind of covered a couple, but are there any specific USP from a technological or commercial point of view that makes yours better than those guys?
I would say that still the two key reasons customers go for us is the flexibility and the price.
Price, okay.
Yeah.
And can you define a bit more on flexibility?
So let's say you bought virtual SAN a while ago and you're using it and you grew out of your virtual SAN environment. You contact StarWind and say, guys, I'm ready for hyper-converging my stuff. And we say, okay. And he can then reuse his StarWind license in the appliance. He can reuse his OS license, his Veeam licenses, all this stuff can be reused. So that's was a typical problem when you get into something hyper-converged. You cannot really use the old stuff you got. And we allowed reusing all of it, including the storage virtualization stack license on it.
Not quite. So if you have vSphere, depends on how
yeah, it would depend. There are cases where you cannot and cases where you can. we just said by default that everything you had before, you can use it on the new hardware. As long as we know it and it's like not an ancient technology, we would support it. And then the same thing happens to customers using the hyper-converged appliance and then trying to scale it differently. So we had, as I said before, we had customers who said, okay, we start with the hyper-convergence. What happens if it doesn't work for us? And we decide to just shuffle everything and move to compute and storage. We would support it too. So there is no need to just destroy all the cluster and move.
Well, the others can do that as well. So vSAN, for example, can do the same. You can just strip out the vSAN license, stick a storage array behind it.
Yeah, especially if you're going from VMware to Hyper-V.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's another thing. So we support multiple hypervisors also. And there's a lot of customers, especially at the lower end of the SMB and mid SMB, who are coming from VMware to Hyper-V. And this migration is very, very painful to them because they have replaced everything at the same time. Not only the hardware, but the operating system, backup application, and all the process inside. And with us, this transition is completely painful.
So it's similar to StarVirtual, for example, from HPE.
So one of the challenges with using object storage as a disk, and I think there are a couple of them, is eventual consistency issues, and how do you deal with that? And the fact that every time you write something, you're creating another object. You're not actually modifying, read, modify, write, or anything like that. You're not using log structure on the back end of S3, whatever it looks like, right? You're just writing S3 objects.
Yes.
So I mean, how do you deal with the eventual consistency issue? So I do a write, sometime later it actually gets to S3, and I do a read in the interim, and it's not the data that I wrote.
You have to use this one in a configuration when it's used as a disk, but there's a special, let's say, the purpose of this disk is not frequently use a tier. So it would be a bad idea to use it in a configuration when there's no spinning disk or no flash on top of it at all. But if you do kind of the spoofing, like if you put a huge amount of flash or dynamic memory in front of it, so it kind of absorbs the right pressure on it, it's okay. And also if you use it as a local called tier, which S3 essentially is, then you'll be fine. Because what we do, we are not trying to really invent something new. It's a different way to plug in the public cloud into the configuration where it's needed but it's not supported yet.
Yeah. I was thinking you could actually do this for like a Mac backup disk or something like that, a SATA disk, and just plug this device in, but it's not that simple.
No. Well, speaking of Macs, we've been known as a substitute for time capsule for a long while.
Yeah.
I was surprised my friend told, like, oh, you work at StarWind. I use them for the time capsule. Like, why? And then he told me the whole backup thing. I was really surprised.
Right.
Speaking about the flexibility, to answer your question more fully, there is one key difference between hypervisor native solutions like vSAN and Storage Spaces Direct and StarWind. You only license StarWind on the nodes where it handles storage. If you have a massive cluster with, let's say,
Good point, yeah.
yeah, with a massive, with let's say 10 nodes, but you're not doing storage on all of them, or you don't need storage on all of them.
You only license
You
storage
only license StarWind on 2 or 3 nodes. With vSAN, you need it licensed on all of the
Compute
nodes, and with Microsoft, you need a data center license for every core in the cluster.
Yeah, it's one of the things that annoys me
That is a
most
good
about
point.
vSAN pricing is you pay the same if you're consuming or providing.
Yeah. So basically, the whole idea is filling the flexibility holes and saving people who fell into not really scale out and not really scale up.
Are you allowed to talk about list pricing on this, or is it something you take offline?
I can watch the pricing and then talk to it because I'm really bad with numbers and really bad with data. But really, the starting HCI cluster with 2 nodes would be sub 30K. And I think the smallest model we currently scaled down to a 4 terabyte cluster with each node having one 8-core CPU, 64 gigs of RAM, and something like 4 terabyte usable. The list price on that is less than $20,000.
That excludes the hypervisor?
That includes either FreeSXI or Microsoft.
FreeSXI.
Yeah, it can run FreeSXI.
Or you can just buy the OEM.
Yeah, we're by the way, we're one of the few companies who can OEM VMware Essentials Plus into the system. Typically, that's not something you get with the hyperconversion
But
offering.
that's not a selling point.
Well, it's not a selling point. It's
no.
just one more thing about the flexibility.
Yeah.